Not the best, as in I've never not worked before, Edward. Firstly, it's nice to come back and speak to you. Of course, thank you for the invitation.
No worries
No,
at all.
I've never not worked before. So it's not me taking a break for any reason. It's just obviously leaving West Ham was the right thing to do. I found it very hard. David will tell you, being number two, we're very good friends, and it was important to maintain that friendship. So that was difficult, but being out of the game is not an easy one for me. I enjoy being busy. I enjoy being involved, and it's been a challenging time in that respect, if I'm honest.
Can you talk to me about when the coach is out of work in terms of are you applying for jobs? Obviously, I've heard you talk a lot, obviously on Talk Sport and a few other podcasts since you've left West Ham, and obviously the reasons why we won't go into those reasons. That obviously pretty obvious. You talked about them a lot, but in terms of when you leave work, how that kind of process is for you.
The problem in football, in terms of football management or head coach, whatever you want to call it now, Edward, the problem is you go from 100 mile an hour to 0 mile an hour. There's nothing in between. You go from training, matches, meetings, medical analysis, sports science, planning schedules, structures, club board, club secretary, meeting agents, meeting players, etc., etc. You go through the whole works. You travel to away games, you get back late, you're preparing for the next game, and you go from that consistent, highly demanding, challenging role to nothing.
Yeah,
So you see someone, and that's a real problem. And I think I'm not saying it's a real problem. You've got to deal with it. That's life.
yeah,
But the term is in terms of when you enjoy that pace of work and enjoy that pace of life, then it is a void. Obviously the easy thing to say to you would be the fix of the game. The match itself is the adrenaline fix. All the work you've done in a week, the preparation, it all boils down to kickoff. And right now around the country, at what is it now, 20 past 3, the games are on, and this is what you work so hard for. But when you take that away, it's a difficult one. You try and fill it. And as you say, and that's your earlier question, of course, you have agents working for you for jobs and whatever it is. But you notice trends. The trend right now is to go for younger managers, lots of overseas managers, younger technical directors. So there's a definite trend, and you try and fight the trend or try and buck the trend, but it's difficult, and you have to be patient. But it's not an easy process, but in any shape or form. When people say, "Ah, it's fine, enjoy playing golf." Someone just said to me 10 minutes ago, a friend of mine, enjoy playing golf. Well,
yeah.
golf is nice to do, but it's not a purpose to get up in the morning, put it that
No.
way.
Would you? I think right now you're also doing a lot of media work. So has that been a good void for you to be? Obviously, I've seen you on Talksport a few times. Was that like fill that void of it or not?
Yeah, it does. I just did the BBC just now, and it's always it's nice to be invited. It's nice to go and watch live football, and you're speaking about football, Edward. So it's a passion that we all enjoy so much. So yeah, of course, you're very privileged to be involved in football in any capacity. But this is said in the right way, in the right spirit. Is when you've been fortunate enough to taste a really fine wine, and the fine wine is managing a good club and being the head coach and doing what you do, to have that taken away is very, very difficult. And when you tasted that fine wine, someone passed you a Ribena, it doesn't taste quite the same.
Yeah.
It's that type of situation. So no, it's good to be involved. It's good to go and watch games. It's good to commentate and to be involved with some really, really talented and good people. But at the same time, you want to really have that purpose in life.
Would you ever go to a number two again, or would you ever be want to be part of a coaching setup where you're not really number? Because I know you've touched on that before, how you like maybe the control of that being the number one. But would you ever do that again or not? Or would you have your mind focused on either being a technical director, which you've been in the past, where with also Brentford, or would you want to be a head, be like a manager or a
Uh,
head coach again?
Good question. Really good question. You never say never. I think the fact is, I had a number of years in the city being in charge of trading desks, and then you go into being in charge of the academy, and then as you said, I was technical director at Brentford in charge of all the first team academy, all the departments, medical, sports science, and analysis, coaching. So you've always been very fortunate to be in that position, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it. I love the stress. I love that other people shy away from it. I really enjoy it. And obviously managed for a number of 400 odd games and enjoyed being number one. And it's not said in an arrogant way. It's not about ego, but it's what you enjoy doing. And David won't mind me saying, I found it very, very difficult. I'm sure he would the same. To have it been a number one for so long and then find yourself even in the most basic of decisions. Someone would say to me, "What time's the coach leaving?" And I would say, "Well, look, we need to be at the state. We need to be at Euston for the train. We need to be there by by 2:15, we leave the training ground. Let's leave the training ground by 10 to 1. Give the players 10 to 1 on the coach. We depart no later than 1 o'clock, for example. A really basic decision. And you delegate accordingly to people. Of course you do. But even when little things are taken out your hand, you have to check it, and it's very, very, as I say, it either comes natural to you or it doesn't. And I'm saying, not saying fortunate. I just have always been that way inclined, right the way through school, right the way up. I've always been that way inclined, and yeah, I think I have to look at it. Technical directors. What worries me about that, the role I had at Brentford was all encompassing. Loved every minute of it, and very thankful to Matthew for that. But now technical directors are really viewed by many, many fans as heads of recruitment. It's just recruiting. It's who's our technical director signed.
Yeah.
And it's, well, what about the rest of it? What about the sports science? What about analysis? What about the departments? What about the budgets? No, no, it's just about who you've signed. So I think, yeah, listen, in football, jobs are few and far between, but you've got to look at everything, Edward. But I know what I'd like to be, that's for sure.
Finish lastly on this. I think you mentioned a really good point earlier about maybe the trend that clubs are looking for young or British managers or overseas young or coaches. Do you think, as an experienced manager now, we've just seen Ian Holloway obviously go in again. We've seen a few other managers, Steve or Bruce have gone in at also Blackpool. So there is obviously space there, but that'll be going obviously down the leagues. I think there's also two questions in here. One would be, would you go down the leagues to League One, League Two? And I think also the next question also would be, would you, if there was a young coach, and he needed a bit of an experienced hand there, would you feel more kind of comfortable maybe going in because you'll maybe be able to pass on your experience, maybe even have more kind of control with a younger coach?
Yeah, that's an option, Edward, for sure. I mean, people talk about the mentoring role, but at the end of the day, I'm saying this for the respect that that young coach needs to make his or her decisions.
Mm.
Yeah, that's the whole point of maturing and experience is that you have to make the calls. So yeah, you can offer your words of wisdom, so to speak, but that's a really good point. I just think in terms of the overseas coaches and whatever, that trend is there for if you look bigger picture with technical directors coming in who are younger. So for example, would a 42-year-old technical director be comfortable, for example, hiring Sam Allardyce as a manager? Or David Moyes or Alan Pardew or Chris Hughton, some really senior guys, So yes, we have seen the likes of Steve Bruce and Ian go in at Blackpool and Swindon respectively. But with the greatest respect to the clubs, absolute respect to the clubs, they're going in way below where those guys have worked before. And of course they want to be involved in the game and enjoy it, etc. I understand all of that, nothing negative in any shape or form. But you are talking about senior guys going in way below because that's the only route back in for them. And that's a shame for me. I think young directors now are going to go in at younger overseas people who are probably more familiar working with technical directors. I think the severance packages are smaller. I think everything is geared to be more short term. And that's a trend that's in place. And we've got to either be very, very patient or find a solution to that.
Sure. We spent the last few minutes talking about that. I just want to go because this podcast is all about learning about your kind of background and where your life started off in terms of your childhood, moving into coaching, moving into you being a trader, etc. So I just want to talk about your childhood really quickly, where you grew up. Was there always a passion for playing football? Was there always a passion for that when you were
There's
young?
a passion for sport in general, Edward. I was very lucky. Two things. One, I was good at sport. I found it easy, high jump, track, field, cross country, basketball, cricket. I found it easy.
Yeah.
But I was also, I'm saying fortunate, I was a September the 6th birthday. So in terms of the school year, I probably had 9 or 10 months physicality advantage over people within the year. So, in terms of county races and county football and everything else, and I always had that passion for football. But I always found myself. I remember this sounds really bizarre, Edward, but I remember being very young at junior school, handwriting, because there was no photocopiers then, handwriting an invitation to the school guys to come and play football on a Saturday afternoon over the park.
Yeah.
11, working out the teams. I did that, and my dad was a Geordie miner, and dad looked at me like, "What on earth are you doing now?" And there'd be 22 handwritten letters saying, "At 2 o'clock on Saturday, we're going to play for an hour and a half." And one mistake I made was people thought it was an official party and they turned up for the cakes and it wasn't. It was just going to play football. And I
Yeah.
just did that because I've always done that type of thing. So, I love sport in general. I could have gone into track, etc., and I went down the football route. I've loved football with a passion, but I always found it came very easy, Edward. So I was very, very lucky in that respect.
I think society's changed. I've obviously grown up in this era now, and I'm seeing it even from me and from my environment, is that I think society, when you were younger, maybe it was just always sport and there was nowhere, sport was your kind of distraction. There wasn't anything else really as important. Now kids and also teenagers are growing up with so much external pressures with social media, with social aspects right now, socially, your status is very important. I think your perception has gone even more important now. How do you think that how do you think Mark Warburton would be in really our era, in our kind of day and age?
I've got to be really careful what I say here, Edward.
Mm,
Not to upset people, not to upset you. But this is something that I've given so much thought to. Your question, how would Mark Warburton? I had a great mum and dad.
mm,
So Geordie Minor, good discipline, always very respectful. My mum was a whiz with numbers, and thankfully she passed that on to me, and she worked me hard. So I got into a grammar school, for example. I got into Latimer Grammar School.
yeah,
So thankful, great teachers, got my grades, really shaped me. But I worked hard to get into that school, Edward. There was nothing else to do. Yes, there was. But my mum made sure that before I went over the park to play football every night, I'd done my extra maths, my extra English, etc. I passed exams to get in, and so it didn't come in. You had to work for it.
yeah.
And I hear now. So again, I had good parents. Does that change from when I grew up to now? No, it doesn't. It doesn't change at all. In terms of your parents, you're either lucky or not so lucky. Yes, you have social media now, but we had problems there. I didn't come from a rich family, Edward. I didn't. That wasn't at all. There was no summer camps. There was no this. You had to go and play with the park with your mates and do what you had to do. So I just think that what did we do better? We formed coping strategies better.
Yeah.
I think that was probably that's my honest. I'm not being derogatory in any lack of respect, and I appreciate many pressures. And you and I spoke at length about things like that and the fantastic way you've done things. But I just think for now that your comment, if I'd asked you to look at that comment and say, oh, it's almost saying we have it much tougher now than you guys did. And I'm thinking, no, 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 that's not the case. We had our problems then, which were never so documented because we had no social media to tell people about our
Yeah.
problems. So
I,
it could all be derogatory. It almost be even worse for us because there was no way of telling someone.
do you think it's being used as a scapegoat a bit, or maybe like a blanket over, it's been too over exaggerated, maybe, or do you think maybe is it being too over kind of exaggerated by us growing up, or is it more of a problem with you, or the other people need to adapt to us and then work maybe more kind of cohesively?
I honestly think this is something that really troubles me. And you would say, why? Because I've come across various examples where people, the genuine people, Edward, and I know, for example, when you and I first spoke, we did our first interview, and you said, give me on, I'll take a break and come back. Fantastic. You went away, you found a way to work things through, you sought a bit of support, you've come back, fantastic. I said to you all the way through. And that's why I'm speaking to you today, because I know that you've gone away and done a really good work. That for me, absolutely. But that was there when I was growing up. People either had the support or they didn't. What really troubles me now, I've had examples of young kids in academies being let go and not getting a scholarship at 16, and their parents saying, "Oh, you've damaged his mental health. We need the club to support him now because he can't deal with that rebuke from the club." And I'm going, well, we all did that, Edward. You've got to find a way. That's how you grow up. That's how you mature. You develop coping strategies.
Yeah.
And that's my big worry is that if that is always there, I went to a fantastic LMA day the other day at the British Museum, some fantastic speakers.
Mm.
And the second lady on, unbelievably, unbelievable past and what she's come through, etc., and enormous respect for the way she spoke. Really enjoyed her speech. But she said, we say at our company every morning, how's your mental health today? And I'm thinking, well, what changed from 40 years ago, Edward?
Yeah.
People had money problems. You know, there was no free money. There was no shops open on a Sunday. There was no entertainment. They had to make their own. There were problems then, and I think it's easy now. So, is it a bit of give and take from the younger age group now? Yes, of course it is. It's always a bit of give and take. But I do think that that safety network of being able to say that mental health there is too readily available to too many people right now. And it's the genuine ones that get lost. The genuine people have come through some difficult challenges and have emerged stronger for it. Absolutely, they deserve all the help, support that they need. I don't like it, but the fact that I hear it too often now. And if you read social media now, there's too many references to it. Because in my experience, and I'm being very careful how I say this. In my experience, if I've got a how can I put this? If I've got a sore arm, I don't go into my relatives and go, oh, I've got a sore arm.
Yeah.
They'll see me and go, is your arm okay?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
they they pick up on it and say, "Oh, you've got sore." Yeah, it's a bit sore.
Yeah.
I haven't gone in there and gone, "Oh, my arm is sore." But at the moment, I hear people go, "I'm struggling a bit. I didn't get a job interview. My mental health is not good."
Yeah. I get you. Yeah.
You've been rejected at an interview. We've all done it. We've all not got jobs. You will go through it 1,000 times. We've all been through it 1,000 times.
Mm.
I just don't like that readily available. It's about the people who genuinely have a problem and generally resolve that. They've got my enormous respect, but
I
others
think,
not so much so.
yeah, I think just moving on, but I think maybe last point, I think people have become maybe immune to your maybe comfort in that. So you find maybe comfort in that's an easy card to play. And then everyone else is going to agree. Then it's an easy thing to get by. I was in a lecture the other day and we're talking about barriers to participation and things like that. And we're talking about this a lot. And I think what you've said there was a lot of what a lot of people were saying. And half the class had like another opinion on it. And I think everyone has their own opinion, of course, and that's always kind of valid. But when your day, maybe in your era and even my parents' era, I don't think they would ever they would ever go up and shout about it as much. I think it would just be a normal case of internally, like you've got to find a way to get past this, and whatever that is, you just got to do it. And then you come through the other side of it. I think people now find comfort in the whole kind of process of it, which is a shame. But how would you as a coach and as a leader, have you ever had, because of course you've had players, because in recent years that maybe they've had a mental health problem. How would you as a leader deal with that?
I had one, obviously no names mentioned, but I had one player come to me, a very expensive player, very highly paid player, say to me, just to let you know, I've got mental health issues. I suffer from depression.
Mm.
I said, okay. Now I'm immediately angry because I've not been told by the medical department that this was the case. I've not been told by the club doctor. Then I find out nothing's been mentioned. Nothing. So immediate problem, Edward.
Yeah.
How do you confront that? You can't say, no, you don't. No, you haven't. You haven't got an illness. But at the same time, why am I hearing about it? Then I hear this player is off playing golf, partying, drinking. So you have that other side of it. Then I had a player, really talented young player, who had a massive dip in form from being like ready for the first team and a young player stepping up 18, 17, 18. And then I realized he had a sibling who was ill with cancer, kept it very quiet to himself. And he went on to have a really good career. But the fact is, he kept that very, really quiet, Edward, and we had to try and get that out of him. And so there you've got one person who's genuinely suffering, struggling with the situation,
Yeah.
trying to compete in a highly competitive world of professional football, but dealing with this awful situation at home. And then you've got another one who's near the top of his profession, who's sort of like, I can't be asked anymore. I want to take the money, but and this is therein the problem. As a manager, you've got to try and always respect people. You have to. If you have to dig, you do your homework, you do your research, you rely on your staff, medical, doctors, physio, etc. They talk to the physios more than anyone. Family members, you have to get to know the family, etc. Wives, partners. But really, Edward, it's such a difficult one because as I gave that example to you, because you either have that extreme who's conning you, or you have that extreme who's very, very quiet, having to deal with such a massive issue that would break many, many people. So football management, the easy bits on the grass, the most enjoyable bits on the grass, coaching, working with players. It's all of that stuff, quite rightly, that you've mentioned, which is the real art of management.
But that's what a lot of people don't probably see is that they look at even players now, and you can see the criticism they get from all landscapes of media and fans all the time, and the same thing with coaches, but they don't see that behind the scenes. Is it now more than ever for a coach? Is that an issue with a lot of players? Is that they do have maybe drinking problems, or they've got other family, or they've got their own internal, and it's a really difficult problem to actually manage because it's such a sensitive worldwide thing right now, where you've got to be cautious about what you say, because everything's deemed as wrong. If you say something out of line, then it's probably deemed as kind of dinosaur-esque. You know what I mean?
You've got to be so careful because they can take parts of what you say absolutely. Yeah. But I had a player come into me. I had a player who's got an awful lot of goals for me. Then he had a really dry zone, barren zone, but came in and said he was broke down in my office and had an issue off of it. But part of the issue was social media related. He didn't like the abuse, when he was scoring goals. So when you break it down and you talk to them, if I could try and bring it all into compress it into one short area,
Yeah,
he loved the fact that he was getting loads of praise when he scored, loved the adulation around town, loved everyone that side of it, didn't like it when he went to a barren patch, we weren't winning, weren't scoring goals, etc. Couldn't deal with that, but
yeah,
he could deal with that.
yeah,
Now, my question is, well, if you want to look at that, you have to accept that because that's life. It's yin and yang, Edward. But I think therein lies a problem that people pick up this, as in the phone, and they take the positives all the time and the compliments, which is, and in sport, that's going to come.
yeah,
You win 3 or 4 games in a row, you're the best thing since sliced bread, and blah, 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 blah. But then you've got to recognize that the same people will curse you 4 or 5 weeks later. That's the nature of football, the nature of the beast. And people say, I can't deal with that. Well, if you can't deal with it, just delete your Twitter account, delete that. I can't do that. I can't survive without social media.
yeah,
Well, you can't survive without it, but you can't survive with it.
yeah.
So, these are the questions I'm saying. We never had that, but maybe it's just an upbringing. But would you not say, well, if I don't like that criticism, I just turn it off? Why would I listen to abuse from people I don't know, so-called keyboard warriors? Why would I not just delete the account? But then they look at me aghast and say, I can't do that. I live on social media. So I get very perplexed. I get very frustrated that that story is typical of the viewpoint of many young people that I work with, and they're really good people, but they really are good people, but they're just drawn into this world and they can't take the negative. They want the positive, but they can't take the negative.
Yeah, well, it's down to the environment that I think, as you said, the upbringing, or whether the environment around them is right for them. It's about the culture and everything that we talked about so far. Do you think that clubs I think it was maybe Johnson for so Tottenham the other week. He basically missed a few games, and I'm sorry, he played a few games, but he didn't play well. Got abused from Tottenham fans. Then he obviously took off his Instagram account and also Twitter account. Then he scored for a few weeks again, played really well. Then he obviously took it back on again, so it's now on again. So a lot of players, what they do now is they just take it off a week, but then it'll be back on again, obviously next week. Do you think clubs need to do more to protect the player welfare and to maybe do more to protect them from being inside a club, or do you think that they're actually managing it fine, or do you think they're doing too much?
I think the clubs do some tremendous work, Edward, especially the bigger the club, the more the media exposure, the more resources the club has to provide staff to support the players and the staff as well. So there's a lot of really good work being done, have no doubt about that. But again, sometimes it is too much. It is too much in that everything is done for the player. I keep coming back to coping strategies, learning to cope with life in general. Life's never easy. You know, the peer pressure of a young player, for example, he drives in the car park in his battered old Ford Fiesta alongside the Lamborghinis of Ferraris, and the immediate peer pressure is to get a better car or to get a better house or apartment. I understand all of that, but life is about developing coping strategies for the various challenges that will invariably come along. I don't want to sound like a dinosaur. Please don't. I don't want to come across that way. But this is the fear. If you don't develop the coping strategies, you don't cope, and you crumble under the weight of what really are life experiences there. But I had a player went to the airport. He had a break, going away for the international break, and his flight was cancelled.
Mm.
Like there's a problem with the flight. It was cancelled. He couldn't get on the flight. And you would have thought it was the biggest meltdown since a Wall Street crash. It was like, I can't get away. I can't get on.
Yeah,
The agent was phoning me up saying, my players, what are you calling me for?
yeah,
Well, he can't, is there anyone you can, and then the club can help him? So let me get this right. The average person in the street goes to Luton Airport and their flight's been cancelled. What do they do?
mm,
What would your parents do, Edward? You try and get another flight. They look for your refund material. You have to find. You just deal with what is a very, very, consistent situation.
yeah,
These people don't, and people laugh at me when I use that example. But the fact is, you got to cope with the situation. It's
yeah,
one tiny micro aspect, but
yeah,
the more we take away those coping strategies, the harder it is for the people to deal with life in general. And I think it's so important that, as I say, people with genuine problems or genuine challenges need every bit of help to get them back to where they need to be as quickly as possible. But there's too many that are just covered and masked and not making the effort to prepare themselves because these are going to come. And what happens, Edward, when you leave that world of football, when you leave the club, or when you have to retire through injury, and you haven't got this magnificent support network around you, and you haven't got the coping strategies to deal with life, what do you do then?
yeah.
So I just think we're doing everyone a disservice if we don't help them develop these coping strategies.
Do you think, because I've been watching this last few weeks about, about also more sort of blame culture, that a lot of not players, not talking specifically, but just in terms of life, society, but in also football, in terms of everything is everyone else's fault. There's maybe a lack of accountability within yourself. I've always preferred, from being a young lad now, still young, still learning, is that if I've made a mistake, then I'd rather you cut me with the truth than be nice. I'd rather be than being authentic. I think we've lost a bit of authenticity now in terms of society. Can you talk to me a bit about the blame culture and what type of cultures that you would set in your football clubs? Because we talked about this a lot in our previous podcast about environment, about culture, about a high performance culture. How do you create that? Can you talk to me a bit about your cultures that you set? Also QPR, was it Rangers, and also Nottingham Forest, and also Brentford, that you set there that would eliminate something like that from really happening?
The blame culture is a weakness. That's what it is. It's a weakness. In terms of you saying you personally like to have the bad news or be told black and white, yeah, of course, that's the right thing to do, is to do it black and white. It's how you deliver that message, Edward. And that's the key for a good environment for me. It's about respect. So if I'm telling you that you're not being the team on Saturday, I might call you in. So I might call in a first team player regular and he's had a dip. I'm not seeing the same sharpness in training. The young guy's really pushing. I call him in. He doesn't want to hear the news. I'm not going to say to him, "You've been awful for the last 2 weeks. You're bombed. Get out my office."
Yeah,
Do I say that to him, or do I say, "Cena, you've been just off the pace last couple. I'm going to give you a breather to refreshen up a little bit. I'm bringing a young guy in for this reason. Be ready for me. I'm going to need you. There's no lack of faith in the bigger picture. This is a micro decision, not a macro, and I'm getting him on side." Now he doesn't want to hear that. He wants to play because every good pro does. But I've told him in a very respectful way. I haven't lied to him. I've told him this is the reason you're not playing.
yeah,
This is what I need you to do for me. This is what I think you need to do to get yourself back to where we know you should be.
yeah,
So you're giving them the news black and white, but you're not being an arse about it. And that's the key for me, Edward, is how you tell someone a message. I always say to a player, always one of my first talks to players, I say, if you think the session's bad or you didn't understand it, I've got no problem with you knocking on my door saying, Gaff, I didn't really understand that. Talk me through it. And I'll go through everything with you. I
yeah,
said, and in truth, I probably would have realized it's bad myself. I will have already apologized and explained it. I said, but if you knock on my door and go, hey, that session was da 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 da, then
mm,
you've got a problem because there's no respect in the message you told me. So I've no problem you coming to me saying black and white, Edward, but it's how we deliver it. And I again, social skills, education, how you speak to people, communication. Because again, the more you have this, and you people communicate through WhatsApp or whatever it may be, Instagram or text messages, the more you do that and not actually speak to people, the harder it is to develop those social skills. And I don't want to sound like some preacher or old dinosaur, but I said to someone the other day, he had a big business problem, and I said, get on a plane and go and see him.
Yeah.
It's a 2 hour flight. Go and see him. And he went, no, I've sent the email. And I'm going, no, 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 no. He is too easy over email to say no, sorry, or to curse you or to slag you off. Go and see him. When you're in front of someone, Edward, it's very, very hard to be rude like that. You've made the effort to come across, they respect it, and they get to understand you a lot better. So face-to-face communication, having that ability to be honest and respectful, I think is so important.
I think just on a personal note, I think I've got in our school last few years, they basically up was the P department. They set, if like a player basically couldn't play a match, what you'd find a lot of what the kids doing is I'd email them, oh sorry, I can't play this year, and they basically banned that. Basically, you had to go up to them and say it to their face. And these are some I think lots of if that's about, I think just to end off, I think what I was going to ask you, and I think you've already mentioned one also value there, but also respect. I can see how much that means to you from also talking to you last time and the time before. That is such a crucial aspect to your man management. I think what I was going to ask you this to just to end off was what are your three non-negotiable behaviors as a leader in football, but just in life in terms of general?
I think for me, just let me comment on before I answer that question there, but what does respect encompass? It can be that communication that we just spoke about, but respect can be timekeeping, for example. Respect can be dress code. Respect can be all of these various things. If I'm going to meet you at 9 o'clock in the morning to a meeting, I'm there at 10 to.
Mm.
And that old saying, early is on time is late, is one that I absolutely believe in because it's just respect. So, respect takes many, many forms, many, many shapes. That's an obvious one for me. I think work ethic is another. I hate this. People think they deserve it and it should come easy. It doesn't. It doesn't. Nothing good ever comes easy in my mind. So I think that work ethic, because then at least you have no regrets and you have no excuses.
Yeah.
If I go and give it my very, very best shot, Edward, and it's not, and it falls short, okay, that's life. Right? Disappointed, frustrated, but I've given it my best shot. But surely it's horrible to think, it's like a race. I was a young athlete, really young athlete, and at the time I was 15 or something. I can't remember what it was, 800-meter race, and I wanted to break 2 minutes for the first time doing 800 meters. And I remember it was at Copthall Stadium, and it was an open evening, open invitation race. And down the back straight on the second lap, the guy went. I went with him. I felt really, really good, really good. And he came around the top bend, and we came around by the steeplechase, and I eased away, and it was easy. And I looked back, and I had a good, really good gap. And I just eased, over the line, just looking around, and not in an arrogant way, but just it was easy. There's no one near me, so I could just jog over the line. And my time was 2.00.15.
Yeah.
15/100ths of a second. And I wanted to, and that still bugs me now that I wanted to break it before a certain birthday. I didn't do it. And I eased down. I probably could have got 159 something or 158.9, whatever. I didn't. But if you don't give it everything, you're going to have regrets. And that's so the work ethic and that you mentioned earlier on about accountability. What you find is people want responsibility. They want you to say, Edward, you're in charge of this department. They come under your control. You're in charge of that budget. Da, da, da. What they don't want, Edward, and this is what separates the good from the average, is they don't want the accountability that comes with it. So when that budget goes wrong, or the staff member goes wrong, or the hiring's bad, or they don't want the accountability, then that blame game, it's his fault, it's her fault. No, no, no. You want responsibility, you get paid for responsibility, but with it must come accountability. So I think for me, accountability, responsibility, work ethic, and respect are probably the three in answer to your question.
Yeah, I think I think I want to make a point just now that you mentioned respect. Would that go tie and tie with also body language? So the way you
Yes.
perceive somebody for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. If I'm sitting there talking to you now and you're asking a question, I'm like this.
Yeah.
You're looking, thinking, am I answering good questions here? Is he really bored? Is he fed up with this? Should I tell you what, I'll finish it short, Mark. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
No.
get you.
Why am I being so, that's just me being rude and disrespectful. I would never do it, but and I watch body language. I watch people how they talk. I watch when they look away. Now, I know there's people have had various problems to deal with, attention spans and whatever to deal with, whereby that's part of their issue.
Mm.
And that you understand, but that's what you're told in advance and you recognize that. But I can't have it. You're dead right. Body language, but your dress, when you represent the club, you go there and you're representing a football club, you're representing an institution, and I think these type of things, when I see some people get off looking like an absolute tramp, like, and have these massive ear things, and they walk out with a surly type attitude. And I'm thinking, you're in that privileged position that your ability and your work rate has got you to. You're the envy of hundreds of thousands of millions of young football players or whatever it is. Just enjoy being good. Just enjoy that position you're in and represent the club and represent yourself with absolute respect. Because if you do that, I promise you, it works in your favor. But I look at some and it's almost like it's not a fashion show. I'm not on a Paris catwalk. I'm not being sponsored by the latest headgear or whatever it may be. I'm representing, pick a club, Man U, Liverpool, Spurs, Arsenal, whoever, Rangers, whoever it may be, I'm
Mm.
representing that club. So yeah, I'm with you. Body language and appearance are so vitally important, Edward, because it speaks about who you are as a person.
I've really enjoyed this episode. I think I've learned a lot from just even listening to you about your life experiences, and I think the kind of values that you've carried kind of with you throughout. And those, I think what people maybe fail to realize, but you've learned all these traits by also messing up, also having setbacks, failing, but learning throughout time that these are the morals that I have, and they won't go away. I think that's really important. I've watched a lot.
Edward,
Mm.
let me interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you in full flow. I'll let you get back to that. I want to give one example about everything I spoke about outside of football. So in my old world, in the banking world, I was coming in with a guy who took a position, a trading position in a currency and in the drachma, Greek drachma. And on the way into work, complete surprise, the Greek government devalued the currency, right? And he walked in, and his budget for the year was like $10 million to make. This was like April or May, and he was up $5-6 million already, and he lost all of it on that devaluation. So straight away, jump forward to your questions about coping strategies and what was the impact on his mental health, etc. No, there's none of that. He got in and he said to me, "This is wrong. This is completely wrong." And he reinstated the position, went to the boss, said, "I am so right." He had belief in his position, belief in his thought process. He had the confidence to go in with it. He dealt with imagine losing 6 months of a year like that on a train journey in. And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, whatever it is, they reversed the decision. The market flew up. He made double what his day was down before, and he did it. But there was no talk of, you wouldn't get someone saying, how was his mental health after that?
Yeah, I get you.
David dealt with that. He had to deal with it. I'm sure he was devastated the train journey. He was angry. I could see his face. But in that little one tiny example, confidence, belief, he was professional, spoke to the right people, communicated, you know, all of that and got his rewards. And that's what I'm trying to say. It's not just football. People say, oh, football. No, it's like it can be the bricklayer who's got to pay his mortgage and the job's just been. How do you deal with these situations? So it's not solely football or professional sport, but it's life in general. And as I say, I think everything that you and I spoke about, I'm sure your other podcasts, all relate to just dealing with life in general.
Yeah, I think this actually kind of epitomizes everything that I want to discuss on this kind of podcast. And it epitomizes everything about you as well. And I'll just mention this, before we end off, when we had the first, so me and you had the first one a few years back, and my stand was absolutely terrible back then, and it was bad that day. I remember, calling it off and leaving the meeting, and then Mark obviously gave me the opportunity again to revisit that. And then we did it again, and it got 14K views. A lot of QPR fans were obviously commenting on it. This is brilliant. What a great opportunity. And this is, again, we talk about, we could preach what we preach, but actually practicing that and actually putting that into action is something completely different. So yeah, I think this has been a fantastic episode. I hope a lot of young people actually really listen to this, because I've learned a lot by it. I've learned a lot, and sometimes we look at the stars of the world. We look at the stars and we look at the new stars and the new coach and how what. But I think the experienced ones, the ones that have been there and really done it, and have those life experiences, I think they're the ones that you learn actually more from. So I think this kind of dinosaur, you mentioned that a few times about this kind of dinosaur way of thinking. I think that's not old school. That's actually right school. It's actually the right way of thinking.
No, but that's I like that comment, and I've said to people, I say dinosaur because that's the I try and preempt their obvious immediate comment. Oh,
Mm.
that's old school. Oh my God, it's we've moved on from there. Well, no, hang on a second. Many of the values that my mum and dad, for example, and their parents lived to, yes, of course, the world has changed significantly, dramatically, but there's many things like discipline, like respect, etc., which are very, very true. So yeah, I'm with you on that, and I just think don't allow yourself to, I don't mean you personally, but people don't allow themselves to be in this weak area looking for an excuse. Find a solution. And if you have a genuine problem, then the people and the networks are there to support you. But I think you've got to find this coping. I keep coming back to that because if you can't cope in life, but you're never going to survive.
Yeah.
It's a ruthless world. So I just think that for me is key. And don't allow people the opportunity to avoid having to form these coping strategies. So yeah, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. But if I could ever be of help, never hesitate to give me a call.
Thank you very much, Mike. I really, really, it's been a real pleasure for me. Been a real.
No, Edward, that's great. Nice to see you again. I hope we speak to you very soon.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, Edward.